Okay, I am going to walk you through a full essay based on the example prompt that we used when we were examining thesis statements. So you can take a look at the form and structure and the how to for all of the components of your own essay. So, in starting with the introduction, we have the hook. The people that make the greatest impact may not necessarily be someone who has always been around. In fact, and here's the elaboration, sometimes someone is present at just the right time or the right moment. These people may be there to provide support, insight, or levity, making difficult times a little more bearable. So, the first idea that I brought up was about somebody who comes into your life, right? And then I talk about that more at just the right time, and they're able to be there for you. So now I'm going to narrow it down a little bit more by starting to indicate that I'm going to be talking about the book. In stories and literature, this is often seen through minor characters. They may not play a feature role, but their words, actions, and presence still matter to the story. So that's almost like my transition sentence where now I'm introducing the novel. In John Steinbeck's novel of Mice and Men, minor characters impact George Milton and Lenny Small's lives in meaningful ways. So note that whenever you introduce a character for the first time, if you have a first and last name, you should provide both of those names to introduce the characters. And then after that, you can refer to them by their first name. One in particular named Slim, we don't get his last name, so we don't need it, the head skinner on the ranch, bonds with George quickly and acts as an important support system for both George and Lenny. So that transitional sentence leads into the thesis statement. And the thesis statement needs to be the last sentence in your introduction paragraph. And I want you to try to frame it as a what, how, why. So my thesis is Slim plays a small but significant role in the story, answering the prompt. How? Because of his compassion and understanding for Lenny and George. So those are going to be my body paragraphs. Why? With Slim, Steinbeck illustrates the idea that someone's support to help through a tough time can be beneficial and even necessary. So this is an idea that's true in the novel and in real life. That why, remember, is that universal truth, that bigger idea that the reader can learn about life in general through the story. So my first body paragraph is about Slim's introduction. And so I state that in my topic sentence. Steinbeck makes Slim's importance to George and Lenny clear from the first time he introduces him. Now I'm going to set up the quote with context. I'm going to introduce the quotation by explaining what is happening when the quote occurs. As Slim walks into the bunkhouse, Steinbeck spends a full paragraph praising Slim's qualities. And then I introduce the quote with my colon. There was a gravity in his manner and a quiet so profound that all talk stopped when he spoke. His authority was so great that his work was taken on any subject, be it politics. It should say word. His word was taken on any subject, be it politics or love. His ear heard more than was said to him, and his slow speech had overtones not of thought, but of understanding beyond thought. So a quick little digression here. Note that I would have never caught that mistake if I had not read my essay out loud. So I wrote work, I should put word, but that's a perfect example of why you should read your essay out loud, because you'll catch little mistakes like that will end up having a little bit of an impact on your ability to communicate your message. Okay. All right, back to the topic. So we've got this nice long quote. It's almost 4 lines long. It does span 2 pages in the book. So I put 33 to 34 in my citation. Okay. That's all you need for your essay is just the page numbers. And note how I put the period outside of the quote and everything else. It's the punctuation is the last thing that you include. So now here's my analysis of that quote and how I'm going to prove my why, right? That and the what as well. Steinbeck's description makes a few things clear to the reader. Slim is a man with authority. I took authority from up here and put it in quotation marks. And now I'm explaining what that means, which means all of the men on the ranch listen to whatever he says. Despite this authority, he's not a dictator, right? He's not the expected, even though he has a lot of power and control, he doesn't abuse it, right? He's a man who listens not only with his ears, but his mind and his instincts as he hears more than was said. So again, I'm pulling from that bigger quote to break down what's going on and why it's important, and speaks with others in a way that lets them know he understands them. With this introduction, it seems clear that George and Lenny will be not only understood, but accepted by a man like Slim, who will look at them and listen to them without judgment, and will be able to see beyond what George and Lenny appear to be on the surface. Other men, like the boss and Curly, illustrate how easily George and Lenny can be misunderstood. Slim is not like those men. So please note that all of this right here in my paragraph was analysis, right? It makes up the bulk of the paragraph. The quote, it's important, but the analysis, how you explain why the quote is important and what it shows in the way that it proves your thesis is what is important. So as I move to my next body paragraph, I want to have a transition, letting the reader know that I'm moving on to a new idea. After his introduction, so the first paragraph was about Slim's introduction. Now I'm moving on to something else. The first glimpse into Slim's importance is shown with his conversation with George on the porch of the bunkhouse. So I know that's what this paragraph is going to be about. Now I'm setting up the quote with context again, putting it in my own words. George is in a sharing mood, and Slim is there to listen. When George opens up and recounts his past with Lenny, Slim understands what George is trying to accomplish by sharing. George wants Slim to know that Lenny is good and that he is worthwhile. Slim's words to George reflect this when he assures George, he ain't mean. I can tell a mean guy a mile off. And when Lenny tries to sneak the puppy into the bunkhouse, he remarks, Jesus, he's just like a kid, ain't he? And when George is seeking assurance and support from Slim, and Slim knows this. While he listens to George, Steinbeck describes Slim's eyes were level and unwinking. He nodded very slowly. So note here that instead of having that bulk quote, like in the first paragraph, the quote that was just 4 straight lines, I took a couple of smaller quotations and I sprinkled them and I weaved in my analysis as I was going. So you might find if you're like, oh, I can't find like a good chunk of a quote that shows what I need to show, then what you can do is look for little pieces and then string them together by connecting them with your analysis. All right. That's what's called a sprinkle quotation integration, right? So while he listens to George, we did that. Slim's understanding of Lenny's nature provides George with security because he knows that Slim will vouch for Lenny should he get into trouble. So here's where Slim's important, that compassion and understanding part of my thesis. Slim also provides George with an outlet. He is someone he can really talk to, right? Venting about, once again, I made a mistake. Venting about Lenny, should be Lenny, but also defending his honor, which provides George with relief in an otherwise stressful life with Lenny. All right. So again, I took here in the end, and if I go back to my thesis, he illustrates the idea that someone's support to help through a tough time can be beneficial and even necessary. So my analysis here, right, really ties back to that why part of the thesis, as well as the what. Finally, so this is my last body paragraph. So I have a nice little transitional phrase just to give the heads up that we're moving on to the next idea. Slim plays an incredibly important role in supporting George after his devastating decision to shoot and kill Lenny. While the other men seem confused by George's quiet response and refusal to tell them what happened, context, Slim, and now I'm introducing the quote, twitched George's elbow. Now note, whenever somebody speaks in a novel, you use one quotation mark. So you set up at the beginning with the 2, and then to indicate a character speaking, you just use the 1. Come on, George, me and you will go and get a drink. And then they're done speaking and I'm done with the quote. So then I would have the 1 quote and then the 2 to wrap it up. While the other men have no clue, he has the ability to come to the scene and immediately make sense of what happened and then provide George with a metaphorical shoulder to lean on because that's what he needs most at this moment. George also needs reassurance that he did the right thing in killing Lenny. Slim said, "You had it, George. I swear you had it. Come on with me." Slim knows what George needs to hear. Here's my analysis. And Slim also understands exactly why George killed Lenny, to protect him from Curly killing him or the fate of prison. Slim's support in this moment provides the reader with a glimmer of hope that George might have someone to help him with what will surely be a dark time in his life as he grieves the death of his best friend, a death that he is responsible for. And here's my conclusion. Although ultimately George must take on the guilt and grief alone, With Slim as a companion, he has someone who understands and empathizes with the trauma he has endured. Author's purpose here is a great way to wrap up the essay, right? Steinbeck illustrates through Slim just how necessary companionship is to overcome incredibly low moments in life. Without Slim, George would have ended the story truly alone in the world. A friend like Slim makes George's grief a little bit easier to bear, and the same idea can be applied in real life. And this is where I'm bringing that big idea, that closing thought, connecting to the universal truth beyond the novel. When a person is truly at their lowest point, the support of a friend or someone who cares can make a tremendous difference.